So let me get to this bit about broad brushing, and what I see is a kind of something that's taken place. I think happens way too often in the church. So when I say broad brush, this is something that has taken place especially among accusations made about Calvary Chapel pastors. So we did, or I did when I was still back in California 9 years ago. Many of you, if you're not new to the channel, you already know, you've probably seen the videos. Like 9 years ago, more than 9 years ago, I addressed our church at Cypress about the changes that had taken place since the split, and the split had just taken place between Costa Mesa and through the association, and churches lined up in either camp. And so the question was, I don't know where it's going to go from here. There's a lot of questions, but here's what we know so far. And I just told it to our congregation. The thing was, it was a video, and it got passed around, and a lot of people saw it. So it created a lot of interest. So interesting, when I look at Roger Oakland, there are 3 sites that have it. My YouTube channel has it, Roger Oakland's has it, and another private a person that I knew at the time, she's since gone to be with the Lord, she had it on her site as well. And between all of them, it's been viewed 100,000 times. Crazy, but that's how many times people have watched it. And so I had somebody ask me recently, not too long ago, are you going to do a follow-up to that? So I did one. And so that's out there, and people were able to watch that. And then there were some things that people had said, well, you didn't address this, would you please do that? And so we've addressed that over a couple of times as well. Okay. So various other questions, and there's one that's going to be coming out this Saturday, a little short that I've done on that. Another one of the many things that people like to come in and comment. Now, I will invariably, when I start to deal with these kinds of topics, I'm going to have people that are going to show up, and they're going to have all kinds of things very specific to Calvary Chapel, and they're going to make assumptions as though everyone is responsible. So here are some of the broad brushing kind of things that we'll get. The way that church governments work. So they'll give an example of a pastor who has exceeded his authority, and he's doing things that they would see as abusive and not having any kind of oversight, and things are done at the church that really shouldn't be done, and they broad brush and say, see, this is a problem with Calvary Chapels, and they broad brush it as though every single Calvary Chapel operates in the exact same way, but it's not true. So if you find that there are abuses when man would abuse a particular system, let's be honest, in churches where there are elder boards and they hire the pastors, pastors will fall into sin. Sometimes the elders will fall into sin. The bottom line to it is that when man gets involved, man can always corrupt. It's just kind of man's natural state. But to broad brush and say, well, all Calvary Chapels are this way. So I have another thing recently where we've got into the eschatology and looking at Israel as a nation. So as soon as I would say I advocate for the nation of Israel, and by advocate I mean I believe that they have legitimate right to the land and that I believe God is the one who is restoring them, then instantly the broad brush is, oh, well, you're just like them, so you're okay with genocide and killing of Palestinians. It's like the dumbest thing I've ever heard, but it's like, well, first of all, you don't even know the term, what the term means, or else you wouldn't be using it so loosely. And just because for some reason what you think is going on over there is something that I would support if it was actually, as you say, you're making a lot of assumptions. But that's usually what happens. And it's ordinarily done as a way of trying to discredit people by lumping them in with some bad example. So as a person who supports Israel, does that mean I support everything that they do? Of course not, because that's not what advocacy, if you will, or that's not what support of Israel is supposed to be, as though I would just blindly support anyone who's there. They've had some leaders, even in modern times, that I have strongly disagreed with. But that doesn't change the fact that I believe that it's God who's bringing them back in the land. So I'll get usually, again, that idea of broad brush. Well, you people just think that somehow they should be able to go in there no matter who it is, and you don't even know if they're Jews. Well, if they're the work of God's hand, that's his issue. He's the one who's bringing the ones in that he wants in there. He's not concerned with the DNA questions. And again, there's usually other things that they have really going on behind the scenes that's the reason for their hatred and their anger. So when it comes to us as believers, there are times that we can say in a pretty blanket way, there are things that should absolutely be rejected. So could I broad brush the entirety of the beliefs of, say, the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons? Yeah, I'll broad brush that all day long, because they change the very essence, the nature of God at a basic fundamental level. Jesus, to the Jehovah's Witnesses, he's part of the creation. To the Mormons, he's just one in a succession of the creation. So they change who he is at his most basic elemental state. So I reject them out of hand. I broad brush and say I don't even consider them as brothers and sisters in Jesus, because it's a different Jesus, it's a different God. So that's not the kind of stuff that I'm saying. But if you're going to try to make a case against any particular group, and again, this came up because of Calvary Chapel, just because of the actions of one or some does not mean necessarily that all are guilty of the same thing. And that's what I mean by the broad brushing. So I think it's very good for us as believers to first of all understand what it is that the other side believes, and before trying to assign guilt to an entire group of people or motivations or anything else, you better make sure that everybody is really on board with everything that's going on there. So within Calvary Chapels, great example, there is a diversity of opinion on some things, not doctrinal, but practice, things that we do in a practical sense. And yeah, you will have some guys who just go off the deep end and abuse their power, but that doesn't make everybody guilty. I sat in a congregation as just one of the people who was there. I ended up pastoring that church in Cyprus. I was a member or a part of that church for 35 years. And there are some people who came and went through that place and they thought that our pastor was abusive about his authority and all the rest. I don't agree. I sat there through all of it. Didn't agree with everything always, every single time, but I never saw him as an abusive person. So I have seen it where some people have stepped way outside of their bounds in Calvary and outside of Calvary. But I don't broad brush an entire movement or a particular type of church just based on the actions of some. It has to be a universal thing before I would want to weigh in on the whole thing. So again, if people want to change the very nature of God, and that becomes their doctrinal or theological view for the entirety of a movement, I have no problem with saying I disagree with them entirely, because all of the churches must believe that, and therefore it's corrupt at its core. So for us, it is much better for us to have a good operational knowledge of what any group of people thinks before we start painting with such a broad brush. But it happens all the time. It's in my comments section on the YouTube channel constantly. Happens all the time. I want to make sure that if I can, as much as is within me, because I can be opinionated, I'm sure that you know, to not broad brush stuff that doesn't actually fit. Again, I used a very obvious example of the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons. There is nothing of value in that belief system because it is foundationally the fruit of a diseased tree, no matter what it is. So they can use the terms that they use, they can use some phrasing that's kind of nebulous, but when I get to the very beginning of it, the person of Jesus, the person of God the Father, and those types of matters of essentials, the very nature of God at his essence is different in those belief systems, then that means that everything that comes after that is also fatally flawed. I can broad brush reject them entirely, and I don't have to concern myself with anything that they say or believe. It's just to be rejected out of hand in its entirety. So that's a different story. Those two things are completely different. And so again, for the believers, I'm a supporter of, we want to be able to give a reason for why we believe what we believe in an intelligent way, in a thorough, thoughtful, worked all the way through the details kind of a way, and avoid that silliness of broad brushing that we see so many people do. It just, to me, it shows a real laziness on behalf of the people that somehow, some way, because they've heard somebody else probably use the argument, they've never actually looked through it themselves. So this would be a great litmus test for each of us, or a rule of thumb, is that before we speak on something and make a very broad statement, we better make sure that it does have the actual application that we think that it does. Or else we just become people with an opinion, but without much in the way of factual evidence to back up what it is that we believe. So if you have questions on any of that, please give me or send me an email. I'd love to have a conversation with you about it, or to go back and forth with you. If you have any things that you'd like to discuss on it, by all means, let me know, and I'd love to be able to work through that with you. You can contact me through the Ministries website, which is oldpaththeology.net. There is, if you're watching this on the YouTube channel and you haven't subscribed yet, be a subscriber to it. You'll know when we put out content. We're putting out content usually 4 times, maybe 5 times a week. Various things that are there, little shorts that we do, little reels that take place. We take these apologetic topics and we make them into their own individual shorts, maybe 10, 15 minutes at a time, plus our Through the Bible studies of the Old and the New Testament. Very, very important that we study that, being the primary reason why Old Path exists, is to study through the entirety of the Scripture. So we will pick up at chapter 25 in Isaiah. Hope that you're able to join us in chapter 14 of the book of Matthew this coming this coming Thursday, rather. And as we work our way through both the Old and the New Testament systematically every week here at Old Path. And we'll see you at the next study.